Hello everyone, and welcome to the last of our online events connected to the exhibition Reflections Contemporary Art of the Middle East and North Africa, which closes this coming Sunday. We've had a wonderful run of talks, and if you want to catch up with any of them, you'll find them on the British Museum's YouTube channel, and my colleague Vicky will put up the link to these and to the exhibition itself and to the book that accompanies it, which I wrote with Natasha Morris and Charles Tripp. So tonight, as our finale, we have a rich feast. We will hear music by Maya Youssef, talk to the artist Samira Abbassy, and finally Yasmine Seale will transport us to the music and poetry of Andalusia. I met Maya only a few short months ago. Born and brought up in Syria, she's been in the UK since 2012 when she was selected for the UK government's Exceptional Talent Programme. I'm sure that many of you out there know her music on the Qanun, have been to her concerts and heard her beautiful CD, Syrian Dreams. She's done events at the British Museum in the past, and by a wonderful chance, the idea emerged that she would come and see Reflections and that maybe some of the works might inspire her to make some compositions for the Qanun. You can imagine that this was an utter thrill for me. And after spending time in the exhibition, I have to say it was during lockdown, so quite a strange time with the exhibition installed and no visitors. Two works eventually rose into focus and worked their magic on her. And these were Silent Letters by the Lebanese artist Huguette Callan and Unravelling by Samira Abbassy. Two extraordinary pieces of music were recorded in the exhibition, where Maya is accompanied by Elizabeth Nott and MacSween. And we're going to see this short concert in the first part of this evening. The British Museum acquired Samira Abbassy's Unravelling in 2008. The work intrigued me, as did her own story. Born in Ahvaz in Iran, which she left when she was young, educated here in the UK, where she began showing her work, and she's lived in New York for many years. Her work is in public and private collections internationally. Now, Samira hasn't heard Maya's piece, so we'll be hearing from her afterwards, and she'll also be telling us the story of Unravelling. Yasmine Seale is a British Syrian writer, an increasingly recognized poet. She was the winner of the 2020 Wasafiri New Writing Prize for Poetry. She's a translator. One of her major current projects is a new translation of The 1001 Nights. She is steeped in language and literature, Arabic and much else, and will be talking to us about a fascinating genre of multilingual love poetry known as the muwashshahat, from Al-Andalus, sung by women, which had a powerful influence on the development of lyric poetry in Europe. So welcome, Maya, Samira, and Yasmine. It's truly a great privilege to have you all here. So Maya, we can't wait to hear the music. So please start us off. Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for this incredibly kind introduction. It's a true honor and a privilege for me to experience the exhibition during lockdown and then go away and write two pieces of music inspired by these two exceptional works of art. I grew up surrounded by exhibitions. I used to go to exhibitions almost every week in Damascus. So I always had contemporary art around me, but I've never had the experience of writing in a direct response. And for so many reasons, this is truly special. Simon, if I may have the first slide. The very first work of art that really drew me instantly was Silent Letters by Huguette Callan. I just was instantly drawn to the infinite possibilities of lines, and I actually brought in both. It almost like the darker one represented the darker side of our daydreams, and the lighter one represented the dreamy one, where you almost lost in your internal world. So I invite you to watch An Invitation to Daydream. the next composition, which was inspired by one particular work from the exhibition Reflections, is none other by the work of Samira Abbassy, who is present here. And the minute I walked into the exhibition, I was instantly drawn into that captivating state. When I came back home and I was putting the composition in front of me and I started writing, the first approach towards that was trying to write with the lines of melody from Kulthum's songs, which are actually mentioned in the body of this gorgeous painting. But the composition wasn't flowing. And it's only when I decided to go with the emotional fingerprint, if you wish, then I almost started listening to the deeper layers of what the painting was trying to communicate to me, that if basically the composition has become more fluid. So here is Soul Fever.
Maya, how extraordinary. We called our event Music to Stir the Soul, and I don't know about everybody out there, but my soul feels very, very stirred. Thank you so much for these beautiful works that you have composed. This is something I'm going to carry with me just forever. And thank you also very much to Elizabeth and to Al for this absolutely beautiful concert, this wonderful music that you have made. So thank you, Maya, so
Thank you
much.
so much. Thank you. Thank you. It has been an honor and a true privilege to do it. Thank you.
Oh, it's just lovely. Well, I hope we can talk later on. But Samira, now I want to come to you. So, is this the first time that someone has composed music inspired by one of your works? What does it feel like?
It feels incredible. I'm so honored, and yeah, I think it is the first time, unless there are other pieces out there that I don't know about. But yes, this is my first time hearing it, so it swept me away, took me to a different place, and maybe the place of the drawing. And it's so funny that this is Maya composed a piece of music in response to a drawing, and the drawing was based on a piece of music. So it's kind of coming around, back to itself. And I made some quick notes. I mean, maybe you'd like to hear these. I put dramatic and feverish. And it starts deep and dangerous and sways playfully and then repeats. And then it hides and watches from a corner and then comes back to center. And racy, epic, slashing with a mesmerizing beat below the whole thing.
Wonderful. So now can we look at your work? Let's look at Unravelling. So tell us about this work. So first of all, who is this wonderful person there? And I think she's in a lot of your works. So tell us about her.
Yeah, well, the underpinning of a lot of my work is in self-portraiture and autobiography. But I'm hoping to reach a more universal idea of self. For example, Carl Jung's idea of the self with a capital S, which is a kind of the idea of the singular as many, which I'll talk about later as well. She's also the female archetype. She is my maternal grandmother. She's the divine feminine. Figures in my work are invariably psycho-mythological beings. The many-headed aspect is taken from Hindu iconography, but also comes up in Persian manuscripts, such as Muhammad's Night Journey. There was a many-headed angel, which goes, in Jungian terms, goes back to the multiple and singular as self. And that we are all made of multiples. We contain multitudes, and we contain our ancestors. So this singular figure and the idea of self-portraiture and autobiography is hopefully more encompassing, where there's an identification from the center out of the viewer.
Can I ask you, why have you called it Unravelling?
So Unravelling.
Can we see the picture again? Simon, if you wouldn't mind giving us the picture back again. Thank you.
So the title Unravelling came from a sense that I'm getting from things like, the music that I was listening to at the time, Kethum songs, which are about love and heartbreak. And autobiographically, that was going on in my life at the time. And part of me needed to return to the comfort of childhood music, because Kethum songs were the soundtrack to my childhood, and it was the sort of connective tissue of our initial transmigration from Iran to the UK. and so this was the soundtrack that felt like it was about a country that I barely knew because I left at 2. It's a sense of like nostalgia, loss, but yet ironically, strangely comforting. And the Unravelling is also about, there is, let's see.
It's part of a bigger series, isn't it, called Chemical
Yes,
Hysterical?
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So the chemical hysterical idea is taken, it's actually a contemporary lyric from Radiohead, OK Computer. And it's a poetic description of the body as a biochemical hormonal system, which is triggered by neurons. So that title for me feels like a poetic idea as well as a scientific one. It's like a pseudo-scientific way to convey emotional and psychological states, which overcome us at times. And my lifelong ambition in making the work is to reveal some of these ineffable states that make us human.
You've got it. There's text on your work. Can we have the second slide, Simon, please? Thank you. So we're going to see lots of text in your work. So there's Persian text at the top, and then we're going to look at Kulthum in a minute or two. So tell us about the use of text in your work. So did you left Iran when you were 2? So did you you may not have actually had those languages at that stage. So what is it with you and these texts?
So as an Arabic Iranian born in the South, Ahwaz, there's a large minority of Arabs. So my first language was Arabic, and our nearest dialect of that would have been Iraqi. However, leaving there at 2, I write either Farsi or Arabic, and then English overtook everything else and made a stranger of these 2 previous languages. I mean, I barely spoke Farsi. I would hear it as my parents would speak to other people. So there's in my work there's an examination of language and then the disintegration of language as pattern. However, in the skirt of this this figure, I deliberately used information taken from Kulthum's CD.
Can we have the next slide, Simon, please? Thank you. So this is here we're showing a detail of the skirt, and so the text is from the CD.
Yeah, so it says, for example, lyrics by Muhammad such and such, and poetry and lyrics by, and the musicians and the titles of the song, and you know, as a non-reader, I wanted it to be, you know, for those who can read, fine, but I wanted also to read as pattern. And then you've got the flower, which is sort of taking off from the skirt. So I like this idea of pattern migrating, and the idea of migration. How do you explain migration? You know, pictorial. What does that look like? So I use these motifs and visual trickery to kind of try and explain and describe all of these things.
And the shape of the shape of the dress is very, very striking. You know, coming at the waist and going down. What is that?
So this is a combination of the ideas, for example, paintings of Queen Elizabeth I, which were anonymous. What was striking about those is that not only they were enormous, they were like sculptures, these dresses, but embroidered into them was the map of the world that she ruled at the time, for example. So this is dress as biography, and clothing that has clues to the character and its states, as well as its story, and so on. And it's also in Qajar painting, there are these incredible court paintings from 19th century Iran that show dancing girls with enormous voluminous skirts. So it's also that shape that's echoed there.
So that's so interesting. But just going back to text, because you also showed in the earlier slide, there's Persian text. So you put both Arabic and Persian, and the top is from a medical manuscript. Can we just look at get that slide back again, Simon? Is that possible? It's the one after this one. It's the yes, exactly. Yes. So so why did you choose this?
These diagrams have intrigued me for over 20 years, and they are they're anatomical drawings taken from like between say 10th to 16th century. I mean, there's various treatises of anatomical and biological scientific manuscripts that are attempting to describe the figure in all its systems. For example, the bone system, the blood system, and so on. But these were made theoretically. Therefore, there's sort of there's a gap between the dissected reality and the theoretical drawing. And these were made at a time when science was more based on philosophy and cosmology, nearer to the Greek idea of early medicine. And they always intrigued me because when I looked at them, I felt that it was almost like these early medical people were trying to locate the soul. That's for me why I'm intrigued by them. I mean, they don't seem medical to me. They seem more like this is more of a sort of it's like a psychological X-ray.
It's so wonderful to hear you talking about this work. And Maya, just before we go to Yasmine, could you just what do you think about what you've heard? Has it added more and more layers of meaning to what you had found when you first looked at the work?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, I am completely speechless at your reaction. That's most kind and most generous. I will carry those words in my heart forever. Thank you. I mean, the idea, because I also identify with so much what Samira described, being in a marriage where you experience heartbreak and you're searching spiritually for answer, and you're in that state of flux, and in that, the word that basically that I listen to the most is in a state of disintegration, when you and your true soul are not aligned. So it's and in your search for that one soul, that divine feminine, it's striking how aligned we are in so many ways, and how so it's absolutely beautiful. And yes, it makes me, listening to you, in awe of this entire process.
This is so, gosh, we could hear so much more about this, but thank you both so much, Maya, for making this beautiful music, but Samira really for inspiring us in this extraordinary way with this work. Thank you so much. So now we'll go to Yasmine, and I wanted just to start. Yasmine, you went to a concert in Colchester some while ago, and you heard the music of Maya. Is that right?
I did. It was astonishing. Colchester is in a part of England where I've spent a lot of time, but this evening was such a surprise because I didn't know until that evening that it's a city that has been quite active in the support of Syrian refugees, and I think this evening was organized in that context. Although I know Maya has worked a lot in Colchester around that night, so we can't quite work out which evening it was exactly, but it was utterly transporting to hear her play the qanun, which is an instrument I've loved since I was a child. But for most of its history, and certainly when I was growing up, it's an instrument that I really associated with male performers, and Maya is really a pioneer in that respect, and has produced extraordinary innovations within the history of this this instrument. So it's really a pleasure. I was too starstruck that evening in Colchester to say hello. So I'm really glad to be able to speak with you now, and to have seen this video of you performing in the gallery in response to Samira's work, which I just adore.
Absolutely. So Yasmine, you're going to tell us about this incredible genre of poetry. So what is it that has drawn you to this genre, this muwashshahat?
Well, the image we've just seen of unraveling this skirt, this woman's skirt containing, woven with all the names and the lyrics, is, I think, a lovely image with which to begin this discussion, because it's really a story about women being the transmitters through their bodies and through their voices of a poetic and musical form, and ensuring its survival and its resilience. So I'll give you the briefest overview of an enormous subject, if it's all right to send us 1,000 years back in time. This is, we are in Al-Andalus, which I'm sure many of you know is how we refer to the period of Muslim rule in the Iberian Peninsula, beginning in the early 8th century, lasting all the way until 1492, but it's really in its prime in the 8th, 9th and 10th centuries, until the fall of the Caliphate of Cordoba in 1031. And Cordoba is this extraordinary place in the 8th century. It goes from being literally the Wild West of this expanding Islamic empire to being the capital of its own independent caliphate under Abdurrahman I. And Al-Andalus, and Cordoba in particular, was at the heart of a very rich and unique culture, which produced distinctive art forms, including muwashshahat, which are these love poems. I'll just give you a tiny bit of context. From the 8th century, there is a flow of artists and intellectuals who come to Cordoba from the Eastern Mediterranean. They're coming to Al-Andalus, and many of them are musicians. And we have sources that describe these people. Many of them are male singers and instrumentalists, but some of them are women, known as qiyan, who are the singing girls, captive, often sold into slavery and trained as professional singers. And in some cases, we know the names of these women and their stories. I'll tell you one story, which I owe to the scholar Dwight Reynolds, one of the great scholars of Andalusian music, about a woman of Basque origin. She's from Navarre in northern Spain, and she is captured in a military campaign and shipped across the Mediterranean to Medina, which at the time is the center of musical life, and is trained as a professional singer. And there she takes the stage name of qalam, which is the reed pen, the pen with which you write in Arabic. And she becomes a very accomplished singer and dancer. She recites poetry. She's a great transmitter of poetry and history. She knows calligraphy and even shadow puppetry. So we have this very vivid portrait of this captive woman who is then sold back from Medina to the Iberian Peninsula and becomes one of the star singers. She becomes the favorite in the court of Abdurrahman II in Cordoba. And this is the story of many of these women. Many of the qiyan were trained in the East and sent back to feed the musical and cultural life in Cordoba. There is a bombshell event, which I have to quickly mention, in 822, which is the arrival of Ziryab, who is this legendary figure best known for his musical innovations, but he brought all sorts of new things to Cordoba, including new fashion, new ways of eating, new ways of bathing, hairstyles. He brought the fringe to Andalusia. And he really establishes Cordoba as the cultural capital of its time and sets up a music school. He has an incredible repertoire of songs. He knows 10,000 songs, and he begins training a large number of qiyan. And they in turn go on to train successive generations of women and transmit these musical innovations. And by the 10th century, we have evidence of women, qiyan, who have remarkable intellectual training and who are educated in fields that are otherwise the domain of men. And this is the period that sees the emergence of muwashshahat, the strophic song forms that become the most famous cultural product of Al-Andalus. This form is interesting because it's generally seen as the predecessor to the rhymed poems of the troubadours, which are themselves seen as the predecessors of today's popular music. And there's a whole field of scholarship drawing links between muwashshahat and the songs of people from Nina Simone to Bob Dylan, maybe Radiohead, maybe Chemical Hysterical begins in Andalusia. So this is a poetic and musical form. They are poems that are meant to be sung by women, invented in perhaps the late 10th century and written in both Arabic and Hebrew. This is a very cosmopolitan world of professional musicians and poets, and they come from all over, and they are singing songs in many languages. The muwashshahat itself consists of 5 to 7 strophes. Each verse ends with a refrain. So this is the verse and refrain structure that we know from popular music. This is where it begins. The really interesting thing about this form is at the end, there is a final section called the kharja, which marks a real break from what comes before. The voice changes, a new voice is introduced, a singing voice. And usually this is a woman. Sometimes it's a bird, sometimes it's the people of a city, sometimes it's an abstract concept, but usually it's a woman. And she sings in a very direct voice, very different from what comes before. And the other striking thing is that the kharjas are in another language. They're usually in Romance, which is an early form of Spanish. So these poems are bilingual. They begin in Arabic or in Hebrew, and they end with this very direct bit of song in the native language of the women performing them. Is there time for me to read two very short extracts? So I'm very interested in this form because it's so unexpected, and also because these are the voices of real women singing to us 1,000 years later. I hope to translate some of these poems, but for now I'll just read you 2 short kharjas, so these final sections translated by the poet James Dunbower. This one is sung by someone described as a daughter of Granada who, moved by jealousy, sings this song to her beloved. Come everyone, family, friends, I am going to shoot him with arrows. My man sings to other women in the town of Valencia. And this is another one which simply goes, the holidays are coming, but I am still alone. My heart burns for him. And fascinatingly, this kharja is found in 2 different muwashshahat, one in Arabic and one in Hebrew. So they become embedded in these poems in different languages and go on traveling. It's a very resilient art form. And I loved what Samira just said about Kulthum and these songs of love and heartbreak feeding her own work. Music has this power to travel and to go on changing and inspiring other artists.
Thank you. That's so fascinating. Just to hear you talk about this, you have indeed transported us into that world. Can you say something about the term itself, muwashshahat, and then also the context? So can one imagine these kind of wonderful gatherings with these women singing, reciting poetry? Who is around them? Can you just evoke for us a little bit of that kind of context there?
Well, muwashshahat means girdled, or it's to do with something being worn around the neck. But I think there's still a lot of speculation about what this means or what the connection is to the performance. Maybe it's something that these women would have actually worn. They were entertainers, court entertainers, but because of this incredible skill they had, and because of the excellent training they received, they often were able to move beyond that status. So the muwashshahat became these kind of instruments of social mobility, which allowed these women to go beyond their status as captives and spoils of war. And what then happens, which is extraordinary, is that as Andalusia breaks down and is reconquered or taken by Christian forces from the 11th century on, often these women become spoils of war again. They become captured by Christian armies and taken to places like Aquitaine in France, southern France, where they go on to influence the development of troubadour poetry, which goes on to influence the development of forms like the sonnet. So there's this kind of line you can trace through the bodies and the voices of these women.
That's really extraordinary. And so you talked about this kind of multilingual, cosmopolitan context there. So all these languages were known and spoken.
Yes, this is an incredibly cosmopolitan world where often the stars of these musical forms are of foreign origin or of mixed origin. There are sources that tell us about people of Turkish, Persian, Berber, African origin. Ziryab himself is thought to have been of African origin, and they are performing music composed by Jewish, Muslim, Christian musicians who are writing in Arabic and Hebrew, and as we saw, are incorporating vernacular songs, quoting vernacular romance songs in their own poetry.
How fascinating. Maya, with the muwashshahat, they were something that you've known about, that have inspired you too? Absolutely.
I mean, you cannot be a musician without being anchored in the tradition of muwashshahat. It's such a key part of the musical heritage, but there's so many layers to it, and it's so fascinating to hear about the other layers where women were innovators and carriers and transmitters of the tradition, which is tying in so beautifully to all of that, and also bringing the cosmopolitan, which I've never known about. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to read your translations, Yasmine. I'm very, very intrigued. But yeah, it's such a key, beautiful, basically part of our tradition.
That's so, yeah, fascinating. Now we've got a few questions that I've seen coming up here. So one of them is for you, Samira. Actually, somebody called Suhad Rafi wants to know about your maternal grandmother, who inspired so many of your works. So tell us about her. Who was she?
So yes, my mother's mother. The reason that she sort of hovers over my life and influences my work so deeply is that I didn't get to see a lot of her. We visited Iran maybe 4 times in my childhood, and each time was incredibly magical, and she was the linchpin to that. And she was extraordinary because she had a tattooed chin and tattooed eyebrows and various tattoos all over her body. But because, you know, women in the South in that generation did that. And once she showed me her hair, which was in braids underneath her headdress, and these braids went on forever, like going around and around here, and red with henna, and just this private look into her life and just herself was just touched me. You know, my last visit to Iran was when I was 12, so you know, before that, it's just like these influences are very deep.
Yes, I mean that whole relationship really between, you know, the fact that you haven't been to Iran, the country of your birth, for so many years now, and yet you've carried it with you in this completely extraordinary way, and the fact that in that painting you've got these two sides of you that are and so much else, of course, that are there. That's so extraordinary, I think. Wonderful. Somebody's asking here about we touched on it a little bit, the Persian medical text, and I think somebody who wants to know what are the words on those kind of two lines that come out there. So they're identifying.
I really don't know. Because they could have been, I could have reversed them and put them in mirror writing, because I was using an overhead projector. So there's that as well. I could ask a Persian friend, but yeah, I mean, this is part of my response to this, is not knowing and therefore filling in the blanks. I mean, that's what we do. I think that's what creativity is about, the filling in of blanks and translating music to the visual and back again and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So somebody's asking here about whether we are planning to make an exhibition together in the future: music, poetry, painting and drawing. What do you all think about that?
I think we've got to.
I'm in.
But yeah, Yasmine, you've also started making art as well. You're making artist books, which happen to be a particular passion of mine. So tell us about those as well. The way that I love the way that you're going from language now to art, and you know, with the translations and everything. It feels like lots of your worlds are coming together in these works that you're making now.
Oh, that's nice to hear. It's really baby steps, but Samira's work actually is so inspiring to me, and really connects with what I'm drawn to, which is this combination of images and text. And I really, in my own experience, making visual art has been an experience of letting go of control to some degree, or at least allowing for what you were talking about, Maya, of letting the sort of emotional fingerprint, I love that phrase, allow you to unlock deeper responses to the work, beyond what might be put into words or even what might be explained.
So Maya, for you, that idea of the letting go of control.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
I mean, it's always the key, because when I write music, I actually pray before I write, and I just pray because I believe that music is love, and pray for whatever needs to be expressed to the highest and best good to be expressed. And so I practice that before I write, and I even go into meditation which is a letting go of control before I write. And it's all about listening to those small whispers that are not so obvious, which is why I didn't choose to go with Fakkaruni and Hajartak and Raq al-Habib, which are these titles of these gorgeous songs, which I absolutely love, by Kulthum, but just really deeply listening into what this woman's trying to tell me. And it's just a key way for me to work and operate. And I think for every creative, again, just to deeply listen and just let go of what you think, let go of the obvious and just deeply listen, really.
Is that the same for you, Samira, when you work, this letting go of control?
Yes, that is exactly the aim, and it is to do with meditation, as Maya said. I like this quote that it's best to leave yourself out of the room when you're making real work, because you're trying to bypass certain sort of habits, or you know, making work is like a different kind of gnosis. It's not the front brain. It's not, you know, it's illogical if you it's about losing yourself in your own depths, and like Maya said, listening and being still enough to actually hear it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very sorry to say that we're going to have to draw this wonderful evening to a close now. Music to stir the soul. I want to thank you, Maya, for your inspirational music played so wonderfully by you, Elizabeth and Al, to Samira for speaking so eloquently about your work. I've learned so much from you this evening, and to you, Yasmine, for introducing us to this wonderful world of the muwashshahat. This has indeed been a really wonderful finale to our reflections program, and I feel quite emotional about it. We've had, you know, these last months have been extraordinary with the events and the exhibition having gone up. That was just quite amazing. It felt like a miracle, and that we've had visitors too, so that's been very, very exciting. And I want to thank you, the audience, I know many of you have actually followed a lot of our public program, and that's really been just wonderful for us. I want to say that if any of you have any questions that you wished you'd ask the speakers, Vicky will put up my email and I will pass anything on, of course. I want to thank Kim Daly, who's done the captions, to Simon, our producer, who's worked on all of our events, and who somehow, through this magic, he makes all this techie stuff seem so straightforward when I know absolutely for certain how complicated it all is. And finally, a huge thanks to my colleague Vicky for all the work that she has done, not only on this evening's event, but on the program as a whole. It's been absolutely wonderful working with you. And my final thanks goes to the patrons group Camilla, who not only supported so many of the acquisitions that are in the exhibition, including the Huguette Callan, but the exhibition itself, and also this wonderful series of talks. So I hope that we are all going to meet very soon, that Maya, when your disc comes out, we're all going to be there supporting you, and just coming to listen to your wonderful music. Samira, we're going to look forward to seeing lots more beautiful art, and Yasmine, also to your wonderful translations of the 1001 Nights and so much more. So I'd like to say,
could I say one thing? Just because you haven't said it, in case anyone hasn't seen Reflections, the exhibition, and is in London, it's on for 3 more days and is exceptional, including Samira's work and many, many others. Please see it.
Thank you, Yasmine, so much. And thank you, everyone, and all of you out there. It's been very strange, these Zoom events, but I think one of the wonderful things has been that actually we've been able to connect with people all over the world. So good night, everyone, and hope we see each other soon at some point. Thank you.
Good night.